I'm Jackie Maddock and this is Carmen Calder, the founder and managing director of Blue Chip Communication. We are in the strategic public relations, crisis and issues management business, specifically for financial services. Now, Carden has over 20 years experience building financial services brands and their leaders' reputations.
And Jackie, our head of media, has worked in Australia, the US and China as a member of the media, both in print, broadcast and actually online as well. So Jackie advises our clients around how to navigate consumer and business media in the way that's best to build brand and on occasion to protect it.
And of course, there is a lot of brand building and brand protection opportunity going on in the Australian business community at the moment as a result of the Hayne Royal Commission. And in fact, that's kind of why we're here today.
So we've seen in recent times not only the Banking and Financial Services Royal Commission, but in the midst of that Productivity Commission findings about superannuation. We have previously been through quite a significant process of regulatory reform in this country. And over many years, we've seen that whether it's government action, regulator action, or potentially consumer groups, there are plenty of reputation-threatening events for brands in financial services and banking. So we've gone and looked at some of the patterns in case studies around crisis and issues management. And what I've spent some time doing is reviewing more than 20 years worth of data of reputation-threatening issues, so pretty large-scale crises mostly, which have certain hallmarks. And we can see through looking at the data that there are strategies that work and strategies that just don't work. Interestingly, the data I've looked at using case study methodology shows that regardless of the scale of the issue, the reputational outcome can be actually very good. You can come out of a crisis with a better reputation, or you can emerge from it with a reputation so badly damaged that the sustainability of your company is actually threatened.
So we've essentially boiled it down to 9 communication strategies, 9 lives, if you like, and we're going to talk about the first one today.
Yep.
So today we're going to talk about strategy number 1, the circuit breaker. So
Right.
What is a circuit breaker and when have you seen it deployed well?
Okay, so the hallmarks of a circuit breaker as an issues management strategy are that it's usually company driven. By definition, it actually is something that you control yourself and you create. It is also typically going to signal a major shift in the issue, for example, a reversal in the path of the issue or the narrative. So the dialogue changes completely about the issue. And the other thing is that it almost invariably demonstrates strong leadership action.
Okay, so for example, I don't want you to name names as much as that might be an interesting thing to do. When have you seen it work well and what kind of circumstances does it work well?
Right. So sometimes it can be used at the very beginning of an issue, which looks like it's going to escalate quite rapidly and aggressively to arrest the incline. It actually arrests the rise of the issue. So you can deploy a circuit breaker at the very inception of what can be a major reputational threatening event. So for example, or you can also use it at the end of an issue to put a floor under it. So at any point between those 2 points in a major issue trajectory, you can stop it by injecting this kind of action. But for it to work, the hallmarks of it being successful are that it has to establish a floor on the issue, to actually stop the decline, if you like. It has to signal the end of a phase or a chapter. So it must be a clear change in direction of some sort. And it has to be seen as the right thing. Interestingly, it has to be something where justice is seen to be served or leadership have taken swift, decisive action. It's something that actually builds confidence and where stakeholders of all sorts, it might be staff, it might be media, it might be government, actually turn around and say, thank you, not necessarily thank you, job well done, but it's more about accepting that this is now the right thing's been done and we can stop pressure to have a change created here.
So for example, a circuit breaker might be if a telecommunications company had stopped streaming the World Cup, say, or if there'd been a network outage or that sort of thing.
Or if a bank issues an apology. Or if a wealth management firm exits a range of people who might have been associated with a particular issue or an historic commercial decision that wasn't seen to be right by today's standards.
Yeah.
So these are actions which are often quite dramatic. They're things that often show they might show a level of corporate vulnerability and humility. Certainly the apologies that we've seen, which have been very effectively executed in times past, not necessarily the most recent history, but there have been times when banks most recently have turned around and apologised for issues. So one of the ones that's, I think, less controversial would be NAB with the recent ATM outages, where they were on the front foot, they were visible in media, they apologised, and most importantly, they offered to provide some sort of commercial remediation to the affected vendors, shop owners who had NAB EFTPOS terminals that failed.
Yeah. So if we were to outline some of the main tactics, what would you decide that they would be? So would they be getting out on the front foot? Sounds like a common thread for all those issues.
Yeah, full and frank disclosure about what the actual issue is, or disclosure that you don't yet know what it is and what's caused it or how to fix it, but you're working on it. There has to be a perception of immediate action and taking ownership. It might well be that the problem is not something that you're responsible for, but if you take ownership for the solution, understanding the grief it's causing the people who depend on you, then there is huge goodwill to be allowed to continue to lead the issue and to have sort of permission, if you like, to create a solution.
And I guess you mentioned before that there is a window of opportunity with these things, and it will differ with each circumstance. But for example, to use the NAB example, I'm guessing that immediacy, getting straight in there, is really important.
So the NAB ATM issue broke on the weekend, and NAB were out there on the weekend with a spokesperson who was confident, authoritative, but also, looked like she hadn't been to hair and makeup before she was on camera. And so, as the media, media were watching that, it was very evident that there had been immediate focus applied by the bank to solving the problem, not to managing their image. Because they had detailed information, because they talked about the steps they were taking to uncover and remediate the issue, and because they talked almost immediately about some sort of payment or some sort of reparation to the people who were affected, it really had a ring of absolute authenticity about it. And so media reported the story in a very neutral way. There wasn't a lot of criticism. It was a news event, but it wasn't a reputation event in many ways because it was handled very well.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning of that story, as it broke, the headline would have been NAB rips off X amount of people, and then by the time of the sunset, it would have been NAB to reimburse X amount of people.
Right. Well, you've seen that, right? The way the story starts can be very different to the way it ends if there's corporate action. Right.
These stories have to move forward, and if they don't actually move forward because there's not a circuit breaker, then the press will, generate extra angles and all sorts of things that you don't want. So you can just control the narrative by employing that circuit breaker, and then that story's moved forward on its own. And
to me, a key feature of the circuit breaker, if nothing else, is decisive leadership action, which wins support. So we see these hallmarks of circuit breakers as things like commercial remediation, exiting leadership who are seen to be the problem or who must be seen to take responsibility for it by paying, if necessary, with their jobs. In other contexts, you see it as suspension until there's a finding. You see it as corporate apologies. You see it as a major shift in operations. And when those hallmarks are there, they have the sorts of things that set you up for a good circuit breaker. You might say it's just good leadership, but if it's not both good leadership and good communication practice, i.e. making sure that you see this as the kind of strategy it is and you execute it with, there's appropriate discipline around delivery of the strategy, and there's mental discipline from the part of the team running this as leadership and communication people to see it through, then it doesn't work.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of the circuit breaker, but we have so many more insights that we want to share with you. We want to break down all of the communication strategies at this very timely moment in the history of the Australian financial services industry.
So we'll go on to talk about other strategies you can use to rebuild your reputation in a crisis, or the strategies that you can use to limit the damage that might be caused to reputation by events that perhaps catch you unawares. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.